how many of you are aware of something called Operation X? Operation X was a special forces operation launched by the Indian Navy. Indian Navy's divers trained the marine wing of the Mukti Bahini. There was a water wing of Mukti Bahini. They were trained. They were mostly trained in a place called Palashi or Plasi, which has an important point in Indian history. They were trained in Palashi and they went across and they carried out subversive operations deep inside East Pakistan. The first of those operations began on 15th of August.
53 years ago, the Indian army stormed across the front, not as conquerors, but as liberators. Hawker hunters and Sukhoi 7s of the Indian Air Force stormed across the sky, laying waste to Pakistan Air Force assets parked at Tezgaon, at Sargodha, at Miawali, Murid, and as far as Peshawar. Many of these pilots went on their own, with no wingmen, with just Josh in their hearts. The Indian Army launched a 3-point campaign into East Pakistan, 4 Corps, 2 Corps, and 33 Corps. Out of these, 4 Corps fought the decisive Battle of Akhora under the leadership of Lieutenant General Sagat Singh and made it to Dhaka. It was the turning point.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the launch of the book 1971, Strategy, Campaign, Valor, written by Satyajit Lal. Please join your hands to welcome the panelists and other esteemed guests. 1971 was a pivotal year, not only for the nation, but for the world. We are honored to have with us General Sharma, who served in 1971 and later rose to become the Chief of the Staff of the Indian Army. Sir, we request you to share your experiences.
In 1971, I was the Colonel GS of the 1st Armored Division. We had only one division in India, and a new division was being raised, Armored Division. Now, Armored Division comprises a whole lot of tanks, about 250 to 300 tanks. It's a very powerful force, but it's very large. The administration of moving it forward to operational areas and to cater for the large amount of tank ammunition, artillery ammunition, and so on that is required for battle takes a long effort. I just want to explain to you what you do in the battle is not so important as those who bring the ammunition, stores, spare parts, spare tanks, spare vehicles, and spare human beings to replace those who are casualties and have to be withdrawn out of the field of battle. Logistics, most important. If that is all positioned, now tanks have a lifetime. Because if you're running on their tracks, the engine has certain mileage capability before it has to have an overhaul. So you get onto tank transporters to move forward to the borders. So the Army Service Corps tank transporter units play a very, very important role. We did something else in the Armored Division. After my experience of having commanded 4 Armored Brigade in the desert and based in Jaipur, where I met our most famous general of the 71 war, because he was also located in Jaipur. And we decided to carry the wherewithal of tank maintenance with us into the desert. And we were very well prepared. As luck would have it, we were not used in the 71 war. We were in a sort of a defensive position in the southern Punjab and northern Rajasthan area. Sam Manekshaw was the chief. General Gurbachan Singh Butch was the GOC, the General Officer Commanding of the 1st Armored Division. I was the Colonel GS, his right-hand staff officer. And we were all prepared. Now an Armored Division is an offensive force. So it's not a question of defending, it's a question of attacking. The idea here is that you get into the enemy country, you play hell in his rear areas. As far as the defense of Indian borders is concerned, it's up to the infantry and the Air Force and others who defend the borders And we have tank regiments also in defense. It's their job. Now, this is not quite understood by many people. Just before the war started, the Bangladesh operation started. That's the East Pakistan operation. And we had a very important corps commanded by General Tapi Rena, who later became the chief. He's from the Command Regiment. And they completed their operations in surrounding Dhaka and bringing East Pakistan to heel, capturing 93,000 prisoners in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, which I can assure you, no army in the world would be capable of doing. It's the Indian Army who did it. Then he brought his whole corps to the west. Now the question was, Yahya Khan of Pakistan, when he found that the whole of East Pakistan disintegrated, and you know the story of Mujibur Rahman and the politics of it. But the fact is that when in a nation you treat certain people of your country as second-class citizens or third-class citizens, the result is what you saw. Mujibur Rahman went to Pakistan and the Awami League won the election. And since Pakistan did not accept that, problem arose in East Pakistan of making themselves independent. Of course, we assisted them with the Mukti Bahini. Mukti Bahini was their organization, but a fair amount of Indians were also there. Bengalis all spoke Bengali. They dressed up like Bengalis. And they did a lot of good work behind the lines of the Pakistani forces to destroy communications, create alarm and despondency amongst the commanders, assisted our troops. Now, when the Indian Army concentrated in the West, I think Mrs. Indira Gandhi decided to call it quits. She was pressurized, I must say, by not only the United States, but the then Soviet Union, that you've done enough, you have proved your mettle, go no further. Pakistan is a separate country. We don't want you to get into Pakistan. Mark you, the Americans with President Nixon as the boss hated India and hated Indira Gandhi. Though she went there, tried to make friends with him, but he called her the nasty name, starting with D. That was his style. But she did a great job. When you win in a war, it's not only the military, it's the whole government. The civil services, the police services, the transport services, the railways, the civil airlines, the navy besides that's military, but even the merchant navy, others, they all get together under the orders of the Prime Minister. Every department of government was assisting Sahib Manekshaw. So one of the lessons, great lessons of 1971, is that it's not a military affair. It's a total affair. It's politics, diplomacy, and military put together, when combined, is a tremendous force. That's what happened. The Yama division was not used. I'll only say one thing about that. We were ready to go in. The only people who saw action in the Yama division was our reconnaissance troop of light AMX tanks. We had 9 of them in our reconnaissance troop. These were used to bash up Pakistani outposts, etc., so that our infantry could get across the border and get into Pakistan. Other than that, we were ready to go, but nobody used us. After the war was over, Sahib Manekshaw came to meet all the troops, and he met the Armored Div troop. And he said, I'm sorry? The Armored Division didn't do anything in the war. So he came to lunch in our field mess. And I said something to my general, General Butch. And he told Sam that Colonel Sharma wants, I was only a colonel, Colonel Sharma wants to say a few words. He said, yes. He knew me. What did you say? I said, Armored Division is a huge weapon, like the sword of Richard the Lionheart of Britain, a la the Crusade. It requires the strength of Richard the Lionheart to be lifted and used. Unfortunately, we have no Richard the Lionheart in our country, so you couldn't use it. So that's it. But it was a great experience in war because we faced a lot of problems, and especially by the Pakistani artillery and the attempts that the Pakistani made to attack across our borders. If you asked all of us in the field, what was it that we allowed us to win the battle against Pakistan? Because we were very strong. The answer given by even the troops was up to the Lord above. Allah Mian was in Bangladesh counting all the rapes and the nasty things that were done to the civil population. He wasn't there. All our Guru Nanak Ji and our Lord Krishna and Lord Ram were all there supporting us. With the result that if Pakistan made 100 mistakes, we made only 80. That was the difference between success and failure. Last thing I want to tell you is about the Indian soldier. I think we have the best military in the world, Army, Navy, and Air Force. But I speak of the Army. I don't know much about the Air Force and the Navy. That the Air Chief will tell you. We are honorable soldiers, and as Bhuvan said to you earlier, the culture of the military is something that is essential for the development of a nation. You have to spend blood. But the culture that is there in the military is unheard of in the civil society. We have Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Christians, the whole lot of every caste and creed of India, backward caste, forward caste, who form our military. And in our military, we feed from the same langar. We have the same food. Many of our units have a single room where all the religious people go to pray. We accept every religion's gods, their various holidays, their various celebrations, we join them. It's the politics of the country which creates division among the castes and creeds, because that's how they get their votes. It's not the military. Military is all equal. So it's an example to everybody. Secondly, the Indian soldier is defending. He's not attacking other people's country. You're fighting against to protect your own nation. You're ready to give your life for that. Other countries like America and Western Europe, etc., they are, going into other people's countries. They are creating mayhem in other people's countries with their military. That's the difference. We only defend ourselves. We don't go into other people's countries. So anyway, I think he's a very good soldier. And one final thing about him is he's an honorable soldier. We don't go into, for Pakistan, for instance, we had 93,000 prisoners. They all went as ambassadors of India back to their land, treated so well that they put on weight and they were very happy. Mark you, they can't say that in Pakistan. Their throat will be cut next morning if they praise India. That's unfortunate as far as our neighbor is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, General Sharma. Very few people have the experience of General Sharma, and I would like to inform the civilians here that his elder brother, Major Somnath Sharma, was India's first Paramveer Chakra. I invite the author, Satyajit Lal.
Of Vietnium vietat facium, I shall either find a way or make one. These were the words said by the legendary Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca as he crossed the Alps and made his way into Rome. And it was this ethos, this mindset, that Lieutenant General Sagat Singh embodied when he crossed the Meghna and entered Dhaka, liberating a new nation in our world. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Air Chief Marshal Chaudhary, General V.N. Sharma, my panelists, Lieutenant Governor Anil Baijal sir, my fellow principals of Modern School and PGDAV College, teachers, faculty, friends, and distinguished guests. 53 years ago, the Indian Army stormed across a front, not as conquerors, but as liberators. Hawker hunters and Sukhoi 7s of the Indian Air Force stormed across the sky, laying waste to Pakistan Air Force assets parked at Tezgaon, at Sargodha, at Miawali, Murid, and as far as Peshawar. Many of these pilots went on their own, with no wingmen, with just Josh in their hearts. The Indian Army launched a 3-point campaign into East Pakistan, 4 Corps, 2 Corps, and 33 Corps. Out of these, 4 Corps fought the decisive Battle of Akhora under the leadership of Lieutenant General Sagat Singh and made it to Dhaka. It was the turning point. On the Western Front, 10 Division made a stand at Chamb. They ensured that the Pakistan Army will not make it to Jammu in the bloodiest battle of the war. Below them, 1 Corps made its final stand at the Battle of Basantar, where we wiped out a Pakistani armored regiment courtesy of 17 Pune horse. But there are many stories like this, and many have told these stories. So why did I decide to write a book on 1971? Well, the answer is quite simple, frankly. My being a millennial or Gen Z, depending on what the lingo is, we were never told about this war. The independent history of India was never taught to us. Our history book stopped at 1947, labeling Mahatma Gandhi as the hero, and stopped. And but 1971, the creation of Bangladesh, is the greatest achievement of an independent democracy. Our soldiers marched in with the seeds of democracy for those who craved freedom. As President Lincoln once said, those who died in battle have spoken far more eloquently for themselves than any of us possibly can. And today we are simply humbled by them in spirit. And today, as I look upon this magnificent audience of war heroes, historians, and veterans, I cannot help but miss some of the eminent personalities who I had the honor of interviewing but couldn't make it, unfortunately. We miss Air Vice Marshal Bhupendra, we miss Air Marshal Ravindranath Bhardwaj, we miss Lieutenant General Hanut Singh Rathore, we miss Naib Rasaldar Muhammad Noor Khan, we miss Commodore K.P. Gopal Rao, and of course, Captain Mahendranath Mulla, who went down with the INS Kukri. But today with us, I'm honored to present to our chief guests the heroes in our auditorium today, starting with Air Marshal Manjeet Singh Shekhon, the detachment commander of 121 Ad Hoc Squadron, who performed close air support missions in Kashmir. We have Air Commodore Krishna Kumar Badwar, the commanding officer of number 35 Rapiers, the man who bombed Karachi. Normally, I would save this as a spoiler for the book, but I must add that it was Air Commodore Badwar's squadron that destroyed Pakistan Air Force's RB-57F Canberra, the greatest reconnaissance and island asset they had in their Air Force. Besides him, we are welcomed by many other personalities as well. We have Air Marshal Narayan Menon from number 26 Warriors, a fellow Modernite, who provided close air support in Shakargarh. We have Brigadier Brajendra Singh from 17 Pune Horse, who took an airstrike like a hero and was wounded on the battlefield. Like many before him, he had the privilege of spilling blood on Pakistani soil. Ladies and gentlemen, we also have the family of Air Marshal R.N. Bhardwaj. I'd like you to welcome them. A reminder that it was the legendary flight commander of number 20 Lightnings that destroyed the private aircraft of Brigadier General Chuck Yeager at Chaklala Rawalpindi on 5th of December. We have an eminent fighter controller, Group Captain Madan Lal Bauntra, who has been kind enough to join us. We often hear the tales of frontline warriors, but not men like him and those in the signals units of the army who sit in the background and orchestrate our victories. And lastly, but not the least, we have the family of the legendary Lieutenant General Sagat Singh. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored by the presence of these warriors, and I hope you enjoy reading about their incredible exploits in my book, 1971, Strategy, Campaign, Valor. Jai Hind! And a new arrival, but none the sooner, Air Marshal Vinod Kumar Bhatia, the last living Veer Chakra and Bar of the Indian Air Force. I must tell you, this incredible pilot flew the deepest Sukhoi 7 offensive counter-air mission in 1971, hitting Shortcut Road, presently known as PAF Rafiki. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your presence tonight. Now we shall move to the moment all of you have been waiting for. We are launching the book.
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, my beloved illustrator of this great accomplishment, Arjun Prakash Iyer.
He's the publisher of the book, Brigadier Rajendra Singh, Sabre and Coel. Please come. Please, next to the... We are honored to have with us Shri Anil Baijal, who was a young IAS officer in 1971. And I'll request him to kindly come here and share some of his experiences. Sir.
So, brothers, as you've been told, after 55 years working only in files, we speak less and write more. So I would be very short, but I must say that I have great pleasure to be present today here in the launch of 22-year-old youngster Satyajit Lal's book on the 1971 war. We have just seen the book and it's been shown. Satyajit Lal traveled across continents to pursue this, because I was in touch with him all the time. Where was he and what are he doing? His passion for global affairs, war studies and military history as an undergraduate, etc., etc. He's done all this work, very, very hard work and well written, I must say. I was quite impressed when I met him for the first time. Well, his book has been written over half a century. If I'm given to understand, I'm going to read it now and come back to you if I'm not saying the right thing. Is a fresh interpretation of India's greatest victory. In this book, the events in South Asia and Itne has revisited in a day. He's mentioned all about it. Let me not waste your time. Now, as a young IAS officer, I was serving in Assam in 1971 and dealt with the task of thousands of refugees pouring in from East Pakistan. So in that sense, I had some relationship with the army. And then later on, I went to Mizoram, where Honorable Sharma Sahib was the commander of... he was a savior of civilians there when people were dying all over, because the Mizoram, during the period when there was a severe insurgency by a group of Mizoram rebels to get freedom from India. This led to very severe violence in the deaths and destruction on a large scale in the UT. I can tell you this. And I was there from 1970 to, I think, 2013 or so. So, this led to very severe violence in the deaths and destruction on a large scale in the UT, to the extent that at the peak of this insurgency, they had the courage to enter the police headquarters. And in Aizawl, right in the heart of the town, capital town, in police uniforms, and shot and killed 3 senior officers when they were in a meeting in this office, in the police headquarters. That was the time. And our job as youngsters, I can only tell you, I think Brigadier Sharma will accept that what I'm saying. Almost every week, if not more, we were getting a flag, wrapping it up, a body, and sending it to the house from where he came to work there. That was the situation. Very, very bad. But then the army and the thing, God of help came to us, and we did manage to do it. So, Satyajit's book, I'm sure, will be very useful for future, and I would at least read it, and next time when I come, I would be almost half a historian, but I will never be where our friend Bhuvan is, or his son. Both of them are great. Bhuvan has worked with me. He's a really a very, very, the way he talks, the way he thinks, but we have worked together, right? So I always go back to him, to this quick writing work, and believe you me, you must have produced some 10, 12 books in that period. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we move ahead, I must apologize to the audience. I forgot to introduce the most decorated veteran with us, the hero of Masliya and Shyamganj, Lieutenant Colonel Surinder Kapoor Mahavir Chakra.
We'll have a short discussion on the book, The Time, 1971, with our esteemed panelists. And I'd like to begin with Air Marshal Chopra.
Let me start with one word, wow. And that is what the occasion today is. At 18, I was still learning to shave. This boy had begun writing his book. And I remember he came to CAPS, Center for Air Power Studies, about 3.5 years back, and told us that he wants to write a book and wanted help, guidance, support, library. Interacted with me, Air Vice Marshal Gulani, who was then ADG, now Director General. We gave him the library. We arranged for him to go to the Air Headquarters, to Ministry of Defense, to bases, to give a context of the various heroes, many of who are sitting over here, and helped him get going into this book. And I must salute him. You know, not many people, no, I have written a book now at very late age. Book writing is not easy. As I said, at 18, I was still learning to shave. But when I wrote my first book, I was 66 years old. I was on the computer for 6 to 8 hours every day. And you know what my wife was doing? She was searching yellow papers for a divorce lawyer. It's, because it's very, very difficult to write a book. But let me tell you that he went into Farm 1500s, to Scotland Diaries. He met nearly 200 people he's interviewed. That's one big figure. I'd gone outstation, gone abroad, and as was told in the beginning. So hats off to Satyajit, and he knows he's my hero. He'll be my hero forever. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir.
Let me, where was I in 71? I was passing out from National Defense Academy during the war. On 11th of December was our passing out parade. And before that, the trenches had been dug. They said the Pakistanis are going to come to Pune, especially to bomb the National Defense Academy with all these guys. And where were we doing this parade? Few days later, it was to be called the Khetrapal Square. Arun Khetrapal, the hero. That is where I was. Why I'm on the panel? Because we are writing, we are doing research, and of course, I'm not writing as much as Atta Hasnan is doing. I'm not as eloquent as Kesnor is, but that's how we are. And let me tell you a little bit about my understanding of the war. In the East, there were 3 people who I consider my hero. Everybody was a hero. Everybody did a great job. 3 people, of course. General Sagat, Group Captain Chandan Singh, who later on became Air Vice Marshal, and Air Vice Marshal Bishnoi, then Wing Commander. Many people won awards, many people did combat, very many people did the East, but these 3 people were my heroes. And I must tell you something about General Sagat, and this has been written in H.E. Marshal P.C. Lal's book, My Years in the IF. He says 2 things about General Sagat. He says Sagat was one of the very, very few generals who understood air power. You know why he understood air power? Because he had been a paratrooper. He had worked very, very closely with the Air Force with many, many postings. And that is how he had his contacts, he had his friends in the transport fleet, in the helicopter fleet, and he could imagine, and he knew what the capabilities and how he is to harness. But two things which Sagat subsequently wrote after the war, and he felt strongly, and I think that's a very important, a sense of jointmanship which is important, and that is, first, he said that we in the army do not know how to exploit air power. In all our, his General Sagat's words, he says, in all our exercises, we think Indian Air Force will be a bonus. We plan our war exercises and actual operations independent of the Air Force. And when the effort comes, we think it's a bonus, which is a big mistake of the Army, General Sagat said. For the Air Force, he said, you know, the way Indian Air Force posts TAC commanders, FACs, not a good way. Often, the Air Force does not post TAC commanders and others, seriously. You should, at least the TAC commander or the FAC must be qualified on type, etc. So these 2 points have been written by P.C. Lal in his book praising General Sagat. So I thought I'll mention about General Sagat. Let me talk about Air Vice Marshal Bishnoi. It's there all in the book, the cover for him. Both the airfields, he was the CO-28 squadron. They took off both the airfields next to Dhaka, but he led the strikes. You know, by third day of the war, Dhaka, that's the only place where the squadron was. You know, F-86 squadron, one squadron they had, 16 aircraft, 2-3 had been shot. So he led the strike. So Bishnoi, and also he led the strike over Governor House later on 14th of December, which actually brought the end and forced them to surrender. So Bishnoi, 2 important strikes, knocking off both the Dhaka airfields and this. Third is, of course, Chandan Singh, quiet, unassuming. You know, nobody knew him. He didn't look for glory, even subsequently. But he connected so beautifully. He was Station Commander Jorad, so beautifully with, General Sagat. And we know what happened, and 5 events which made in the East. First, Battle of Boira. Fighter controllers like him were controlled 4 Nats to take on 4 F-86, shot on 2, hit 1, it got damaged, went back, 2 aircraft went back. You know, on 22nd November, Pakistan Air Force had already been demoralized. And that was the starting point. And that day, the army chief, Pakistan army chief said, in 10 days the war will start, and 10 days later the war actually started. So, all recorded in this book. Second, the 2 major events was the Tangail drop and the, Meghna crossing. 50 aircraft were mustered by Indian Air Force to do the Tangail drop. And we all know what Tangail drop is and how many people were actually 2 paras, how many people were actually dropped. And the Meghna River crossing. Mi-4s of that time, they were the big aircraft. They were the top aircraft. We didn't have Mi-8s then. What a great job. And heroes of Mi-4, and of course fighter pilots like, Marshal Seco are sitting over here. So in the East, broadly, this was, and I already talked about the, Governor House strike and the strike on the 2 runways, these 5 major events. And in the West, the plan was holding pattern. The West, we were to punish the Pakistanis, not to take land because ultimately international border you have to return, etc. But I think we did a great job. Canberra hero. You know, I don't know how many of you know that K.K. Bhatwar got airborne to strike Enterprise, USS Enterprise. You know, USS Enterprise was in the Bay of Bengal. They were recalled halfway through. It's written in his logbook. And I took a picture of his logbook and tweeted. That's That's the kind of heroes who are sitting over here. And of course, in the West, closest support. There, Air Marshal sitting at the back. The Falcons of Cham, who, Cham, Shakarkar, great amount. Fazilka, great amount of, army support. And then, of course, interdiction, the amount of railway trains we knocked off, fuel. Longewala, nobody's talked about it till now. Four hunters, and of course some backing later on by HF-24s. Longewala was saved by those guys. And in fact, the Air Force didn't get the kind of glory that they perhaps deserved, which has now subsequently been written about in Longewala, but that's okay. Karachi, both in the Navy, in the Air Force, phenomenal amount. Initially, independently, subsequently, in coordination, we worked together. We will hear from the Navy a little more about what we did in Karachi. AN-12s. 12 into 500-pound bombs in AN-12 for bombing. Night bombing, both by Canberras and AN-12s, because many of our fighter fleets could not. But as was mentioned earlier, fighter pilots went deep at night alone, no formation. Single guy trailing, somebody trailing behind by 1 or 2 minutes or things like that. Hats off to their, I can carry on, uninterrupted, because I've also written a lot about the 71 board, but since there is a panel and others must, also speak, two heroes from the Western sector. For me, of course, NGS Sekhon, Paramveer Chakra, the only one from Indian Air Force ever. Single-handedly, 6 aircraft he took on, shot 2, got shot up. But hats off to do that single-handedly. Arun Khetrapal is another person I'm a big fan of his. Young second lieutenant in a tank. He was told, okay, come back. No, he says, as long as there's ammunition in my tank, I will press on and I will not leave. With these few words, I think I must stop. Yes.
Thank you, Air Marshal Sahab. Thank you very much. May the force be with you. After the Air Force, we have the Indian Army. Lieutenant General Hasnain, we'd like you to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Jai Hind. And compliments, congratulations, Satyajit, and the family. In fact, your father is a better communicator than everyone here. That I can vouch for. Okay? But having said that, Satyajit, while congratulating you on this amazing output which you have created, I was just wondering, you seem to be a person born with a silver spoon. Your family is born with a silver spoon too. If this book had been released 15 days ago, it would not have been so significant as it is today. Why? Why? Simply because, and I was speaking on a television program, I was speaking to someone in Bangladesh, a very prominent intellectual. He said, you Indians only see us through the spectrum, through the prism of 1971. You don't have a vision of Bangladesh through the prism of the people of Bangladesh. Very, very strong words. And then I've been writing a lot on it, and I've been thinking and changing my mind all the time. And what you are really done by writing this book is to recreate that interest in 1971. We can't forget 71. We don't have to pander to the emotions of what Bangladeshis are telling us. This was a war between India and Bangladesh together. Perhaps somewhere, and one day, I'm sure you will write about it. I haven't read your full book. I read chapters only here and there. Perhaps we went wrong in our communication strategy. Now, this is a terminology which you may not have used anywhere. It's something which is very important today. In that time, who thought that having a photograph with General Arora, Niazi, General Sagat, and everyone there, what a classic photograph. That photograph actually is the worst form of communication. Not a single Bangladeshi in it. And that's the reason. Why? We couldn't have thought of it 55, 53 years ago. You see, there is human frailty. You would have limits to your ability to think through and say, look at the future and say, 50 years from now, this will be the situation, so I should do something today. It's impossible. Cannot happen. But then there are visionaries, there are people who perhaps visualize this kind of a thing. Because today, if the Indira Gandhi Cultural Center can be burned down, if Hindus in Bangladesh can be hounded, obviously something has changed from 71, hugely. And that is why this book is so important. Because we in uniform, many of us who have been in uniform, we still relate to this book. We relate to this event. We relate to this war. But not many others. And it's important that not only should you have written this book, you should speak about this book now. Right? This is what you will be only completing your job, what you have done, by actually communicating on this book. Going down in your spare time anywhere, start with the Delhi University. Go there and have I hope they can organize an event for you where you can have a book reading, some aspects of the book brought out for you. There are some fascinating chapters which I've been through. Of course, there's so much of data in this. One or two very important chapters I saw. I just looked at two of them. One was, of course, the famous Battle of Meghna. So the family is also sitting here, and I knew they are coming here. Incidentally, Colonel Ranvijay and myself happened to be from the same regiment, Garhwal Rifles, and later on mechanized. He is actually from my father's unit, right? 1st Garhwal Rifles. When I was in Jaipur as a brigade major, I would often visit Meghna Farm. The name Meghna is there, Meghna Farm. I would often go there because my father and John Sagat were great friends. And in the absence of Ranvijay, she was a little girl that time there. And, their house always had a system of zanana and mardana, traditional family. The moment we used to reach the gate, I used to be taken away one side and my wife used to be taken away the other side. And she would go to Mrs. Sagat and I would go to General Sagat. General Sagat only smoked 4 square. Remember? Only 4 square. 4 square cigarettes. And he drank whiskey and smoked 4 square. And the pearls of wisdom which I acquired just listening to him, it was amazing. The Meghna is something, the Battle of Meghna, something very amazing. I would strongly recommend that your next mission, your next write-up should be a standalone piece, perhaps a standalone, it can be a booklet, it can be a pamphlet, or it can be a full book on the Battle of Meghna.
Yes, sir.
That's what it should be. Because there aren't generals like General Sagat Singh who've been produced here in this country.
Absolutely, sir.
2019, I attended in Jodhpur the centenary celebrations of General Sagat Singh and spoke, just coincidentally for the benefit of people from the Armored Corps particularly, the subject they gave me to speak on, no one wanted to speak on it, was the application of operational art by General Sagat. Sharma will be very happy to know that not a single Armored Corps officer wanted to speak on it, but I spoke on it. Right? So this is it's an amazing thing to actually go into the aspects of how operational art was really brought into fore by General Sagat Singh. Your one chapter which I read here is the Battle of Shakkargarh. And I'm surprised how at the age of 22, I didn't even know how to cite a platoon, right? But at the age of 22, you have recognized some of the major characteristics of this battle from the terrain itself. The important townships of Zafarwal, Narowal, you have recognized all that. The townships on our side, the fact that the bulge is there, the fact that the Pathankot-Jammu road, the vulnerability of that road. I hope you are understanding today that is the road where all the problems are taking place in Jammu at the moment. The same road, that is where the infiltration is taking place. And that is where they are trying to attempt, whenever Pakistan does something in a particular area, be sure something funny is going to happen in the upcoming years. It happened in Kargil also. 97, 98, they did exactly this, and 99, they went and suddenly, they came and occupied those areas. So it's ominous. You've written some wonderful things about that. One of the observations I had, of course, which I would love you to look at, is this aspect of bulges. The Shakkargarh bulge is a bulge, the Uri bulge,
Yes, sir.
Hajipir bulge. Wherever there is a bulge, always look at it from the angle. Remember the Battle of the Bulge?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you should always look at it from the angle of exterior lines and interior lines. The person who is inside the bulge has all the advantage because he is quicker in his responses, Can you imagine around Shakkargarh, if you have to move from this side of Amritsar, and if you have to move towards Jammu, how much of a distance you have to go? And within Shakkargarh, how little distance the Pakistanis had to travel. And so that is what our one corps actually achieved. Tremendous system. Right. Anyway, I'm not going to go into details of strategy and tactics here. The idea is some very good things John Sharma just spoke. Mentioning certain aspects. For example, he spoke about the armored division. One of the things between India and Pakistan, remember, in the 65 war, in the 71 war was, where is the armored division? The armored division is almost like a strategic weapon. It's that important. In 65, we had no idea that the 2nd Armored Division had been raised by Pakistan. It was hiding behind. Today, and you can't hide these armored divisions anymore, right? But it was hiding behind in an area and emerged all of a sudden. What you need to perhaps look at very seriously is, why did we make the mistake of Cham, Jaurian all over again? In 65, we suffered there. They came 4 kilometers up to that iron bridge. Why did we leave this area so weak in 1971? Once again, these are the kind of things you do. When you go into in depth, you will realize you got a lifetime to do this. You will never finish it.
Yes.
You will never finish it. And your knowledge and experience with which you are speaking today, I can only bless you and say that I wish we could produce many more scholars like you, so that this whole aspect, in fact, I would love to have called you a scholar warrior. But you're a scholar at the moment. Maybe you would still want to be a warrior and join the army or the Air Force or the Navy, perhaps one day. Maybe even the Territorial Army, for all you know. That will make you a scholar warrior, right? So compliments once again to the whole family. What you've achieved is no small measure, and we look forward to seeing what else you produce in the years to come. And I'll be always there, available anytime to you. Whenever you wish to consult, we can spend long hours together discussing these various battles. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Hasnain. It's a pleasure having you here tonight. We have heard you so often on television. First time we are hearing you in person. The Indian Navy, the deadly Indian Navy, and what they did in 1971. I turn to Commodore Kestner.
Thank you, everyone. As I said before, I'm humbled, honored, privileged, awed, inspired by the presence of so many wonderful people here, legends, and my 2 very, very distinguished co-panelists whom, we have come following in their wake, as we say in the Navy. So lovely to be here. Satyajit, when you're down, I said some nice things about you. So I just want that to be recorded. So I will not repeat what a wonderful person you are and what a lovely job you've done. So ladies and gentlemen, what I'll try and do is bring, since we've discussed so much about the Air Force and the Army, I'll try and bring a bit of flavor of the Navy. It's always difficult to have ships come up the river Yamuna. So we'll have to try and recreate what was happening out at sea. So what I'll try and do, it's difficult, but I'll try and give some things that possibly is not contained in Satyajit's book. We got to see it just yesterday, so maybe I'm wrong, but give you some interesting tidbits about the Navy and also illustrate how joint these operations were in many ways. But before that, I'd like to also mention the Navy supports in a very silent way. We call it a silent service. So we have, to the best of my mind, as I see in this audience, 2 Navy officers whom I'd like to acknowledge. One of them, Commodore Ranjit Rai sir, please, I would request you to stand up. He took part in the war. He is one of those who took part in the war. And more importantly, Commodore Rai has written a book on the Navy in war. His first book was called The Nation and Navy at War. He's brought succeeding versions of that. So he's made seminal contribution to our understanding of the Navy in war. So that's Commodore Ranjit Rai. I'm also honored by the presence of Commodore Anil Jaisingh, a submariner. He was not in the war, but submarines were an important part of the war, and he's a distinguished submariner. So thank you very much for being here. So what is it that I want to talk about the Navy? which is interesting and which is probably not there. One of the things is the fact that, I mean, we could talk Karachi, but I don't want to talk Karachi. That's included. That's caught the imagination of people. So let's see if we can do something away from Karachi. And I'll bring that down in 2 or 3 operations. I don't know how many of you are aware of something called Operation X. Now, Operation X was a special forces operation launched by the Indian Navy. Indian Navy's divers trained the marine wing of the Mukti Bahini. Okay? There was a water wing of Mukti Bahini. They were trained. They were mostly trained in a place called Palashi or Plasi, which has an important point in Indian history. They were trained in Palashi and they went across and they carried out subversive operations deep inside East Pakistan. The first of those operations began on 15th of August. So you want to set your calendar about when did operation start in Bangladesh or East Pakistan, have a relook on that. Most importantly, more than 1 lakh tons of shipping was destroyed by these people who were trained by the Navy's divers. Remember, Navy didn't still have a commando force then, right? So more than 1 lakh tons, which is fantastic. After World War II, that's the maximum tonnage of an opponent destroyed in that country. So East Pakistan was getting to be crippled anyway by the time war started. And this is very important. Not many people know about Operation X. Operation X subsequently ended with something called Fort, when small boats of the Indian Navy went deep inside into Khulna, Mongla and up the Pusur River to help our army give some gunfire support. Now, why was it called Force Alpha? It was an ode to General Arora by the Navy, called Force Alpha. The man who was in charge of that was Captain Mohan Narayan Samant, then Commander Mohan Narayan Samant. He got a Mahavir Chakra because he led this force up the river Pusur. Mohan Narayan Samant had a daughter. Guess what was her name? Meghna. So that's Tri-Services. That's Tri-Services cooperation for you. Mohan Narayan Rao. Do you know who wrote the Mahavir Chakra citation for Mohan Narayan Rao Samant? General Jacob. Not the Navy. It was the army that wrote the citation for. And General Jacob in his own book, and we all know that General Jacob is miserly in praise. Okay? General Jacob in his own book writes that the water wing of the Mukti Bahini caused far more damage than the Mukti Bahini did. These are his words, not mine. So these are some very interesting operations undertaken by the Navy that not many people know about. And they bring out Tri-Services cooperation in beautiful ways. A couple of other quick mentions. We have the Battle of Boira. Now, the Boira is very important, not just for its significance. It's produced some stellar cast of characters. There's a future General Panag there. There's a future Air Force Chief of the Pakistan, who was Air Force Chief during Kargil War. Now, you will be surprised, but the Indian Navy was present in the Battle of Boira too, and in a very, very interesting way. One of these special forces guys, not the special forces guys, divers, a gentleman called Chiman Singh has gone deep inside East Pakistan because he's just told by his fellow, Sir, aa jao hamare saath. He goes, he's a vegetarian, he finds it difficult to live in those houses, eat at night. He pretends that he's a guest from UK in support of the Bangladeshis. He lives on just moongfali every night, okay? They go causing huge amount of destruction, in East Pakistan. Then he is on his way back having accomplished his mission. And he runs into Boira just when the Battle of Boira has started. So Chiman Singh, of course, he is captured by the army. They refuse to recognize him till he sees his gaonwala and says, "Main tumhare bhai ko janta hu." And they do some cross questioning and say, yes, this guy was given for missing in action. Chiman Singh subsequently is again on the riverine raid. Chiman Singh is a Mahavir Chakra. So the Battle of Boira produced lots of Veer Chakras, but the only Mahavir Chakra was one who witnessed it from the naval side, and that's Chiman Singh. So you got some very, very interesting tidbits here. We talk of General Sagat, a great person. The Navy had legendary Admiral Krishnan. And if General Sagat was the greatest sort of combat general of the Indian Army, Krishnan was many way like that. Krishnan is a DSC of World War II. He outgunned in a gun battle an Iranian ship captain. Okay, so that somewhat little plump person that you see in the surrender photograph, don't go by that look. He was a fantastically brilliant person. Okay, so where is Krishnan? Krishnan is there in Junagadh, liaising with the army when Operation Peace happens. Krishnan is there in 61, liberation of Diu. He's told to stay 10 miles away, give distant support. He says, like hell, I'll give distant support. And he blasts the Diu fort with the 6-inch guns of Delhi. So there's combat experience, just as General Sagat, does Goa first, then goes to Nathula. So by the time Krishnan ends in 71, he's the CNC East. He's the one who lures Ghazi to its doom. He's the one who decides to employ the aircraft carrier in offensive operations in the East with the backing of the Navy chief, of course. So there are these great, what I'm trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the Navy produced, sometimes war produces this alchemy where you have this great cast of characters. So the Navy had a fantastic cast of characters, Admiral Nanda at top, General Krishnan in East, Swaraj Prakash, the missile boat commanding officers, great guys who did lots of fantastic deeds. We don't know too much about them. I'll end with what can be described as somewhat delightful and somewhat poignant strategic consequences of the 71 war. One, of course, the mention has been made of Khukri, So I must mention about Khukri in a bit because Captain Malla's sacrifice was great. The second mention was made of the Enterprise incident. Okay, I'm not going to talk about what happened. Obviously, Enterprise couldn't interfere by the time the surrender happened. But please remember, if we're seeing the long lee of war today, 50 plus years later, it was the Enterprise incident that forced India to think about what would be its strategic deterrence against bigger powers. That while we might take on powers in our neighborhood, what happens if we are forced to coercive action by bigger powers, and how it has led to force development over the subsequent years within the army, within the air force, and indeed within the navy. I'll leave you guessing, or we can discuss that during question answers. But it was the Enterprise incident that forced India to think about strategic deterrence in long term. The next point is about Khukri. Two very quick lessons. One, Captain Mahendranath Malla going down illustrated, this is a young navy, we don't often face direct battle, but when he went down with his men, he showed to a young navy within and to the outside world that this is what tradition is all about. As someone said, it takes 30 years to build a ship, but 300 years to build a tradition. For a young navy to start this tradition that you never leave your own, I think Captain Malla, what he did, we produced 8 or 9 Mahavir Chakras in the war, but Captain Mahendranath Malla's great thing, of course, sacrifice there. But let's look at one of the more salutary aspects of Khukri. When we lost Khukri and Khukri sank, we realized that one of the problems was the sonar, which the detection, this was a foreign ship. The sonar was not made for Indian waters. So Indian Navy started its indigenization journey. It had begun much earlier, but we said we must build an Indian sonar. Now the man who built the Indian sonar up subsequently was a great guy called Commodore Arogyaswamy Paulraj. Arogyaswamy Paulraj is a ex-NDA. He's an electrical branch officer. But I'll just tell you, these are the beautiful consequences. Arogyaswamy Paulraj journey designing the sonar for Indian Navy made him subsequently become one of the greatest scientists of the world. Today, if all of you are using mobile phones, it is because of 4G, 5G. The heart of 4G, 5G is something called MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. Guess who is the inventor of MIMO? It's Commodore Aragyaswamy Paulraj of the Indian Navy. So these are some of the great consequences of war. So I think I wanted to bring out some of the things that probably Satyajit has not put in his book, but going back, I must compliment, I think, as Air Marshal Chopra said, it's wow. Thank you absolutely for calling me here, and congratulations once again. This is something that must be treasured by. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore Kestner. Delightful anecdotes there. We have some time for questions and answers from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Kindly introduce yourself and then ask the question.
My name is Arjun Hardas. I'm an Air Force brat. All the Air Marshals here know me personally as well. My father served in the Air Force. Now, I wanted to ask all the veterans of 71 especially, have we, in the subsequent years, have we lost that daring do, so to say? While the Prime Minister of India gave the, okay, make war, so to say, but the independent actions have been described by all the services about the independent action carried out by field commanders on their own initiative, carried out actions, which, can they be done today in the same, I'm not talking about political, otherwise in the military, can it be done today in the same thing? Have we lost that kind of initiatives?
Sir, 27th February 2019, one MiG-21 Bison flight commander, who was Wing Commander Abhinandan Vartaman, went up against a package of Pakistan Air Force F-16s. I'm going to be very honest here. The Bison has no chance against an F-16. It is outranged by its radar and its AIM-120C5 AMRAAMs. Yet he dared. And as an action of his daring, as a result, one thing which is not spoken about at all is that Pakistan's package of JF-17 Thunders immediately had to abandon its payload on the border and run. So when you ask me, do our boys still dare? Of course they do. Whether it was Kargil, whether it was the various counterinsurgency operations we've done, whether it's the Air Force and the Navy, bravery remains the same.
May I also answer that question?
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you for that question. It's a very, very relevant question. But my response immediately would be, hasn't the nature of war changed? If the nature of war changes, obviously the nature of response changes, right? So the gung-ho manner in which 1971 was fought, and the Field Marshal, the manner in which he could respond to the Prime Minister's directions in the beginning, we all know about it, right? Maybe that kind of a thing has changed over a period of time. Today, war is no longer conventional, number one, right? We no longer think of huge strike corps and armored divisions getting in somewhere here. You're looking at long, drawn-out hybrid wars. And haven't we fought them effectively? If you analyze hybrid wars around the world, Ukraine, Gaza, who has succeeded? But we have done it in Kashmir. Far better. I think the Indian Armed Forces need to pat themselves on the back because our transformational capability is far higher than most armed forces in the world.
I'd like to support Sir's point by bringing out an incident from 1971. Between the two armed forces, the Indian Army was the first to employ anti-tank guided missile systems. And given our ingenuity in this field, we raised one infantry battalion and converted one armored regiment. So we had the 70th Armored Regiment and 12 guards.
12 guards.
Who earned a Mahavir Chakra in the Battle of the Champ.
SS-11B1, that is the missile which was used, which was later on used by the mechanized infantry also.
Hi, Satyajit, this is Arjun here. I understand that we have spoken about a lot of heroes over here, but we have given special emphasis to Lieutenant General Sagat Singh. So, this might be a little cliched question, but many consider generals like Rommel, the Desert Fox of North Africa to be one of the greatest generals. And here we have spoken about Lieutenant General Sagat Singh and his understanding of strategy and the use of air power. So would it be wise to compare the two generals? What is your take on this as to who's better, if I may ask that question?
Before I answer that question, ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for my illustrator who made this beautiful cover for this book. Yes, he learned cartography specially to draw 6 maps for my book, including the Shakargarh campaign and 4 Corps, and he has put in 8 pages of illustrations of aircraft so that civilians can better understand what assets were used in this war. Now, unfortunately, 80 years after the fall of the Third Reich, most historians still idealize Nazi generals. Not Germans, Nazi generals. And we think that these were still the greatest warriors the planet ever had, with their armored divisions, with their Tiger tanks, with their Stuka bombers. So this is going to be a long and a tedious answer and very controversial. But our journey actually begins in the early Cold War. The Second World War is over and you are an American civilian. If you're an American civilian, it's quite likely that you lost a brother, a friend, a husband, or somebody else you might know to the Germans in the Second World War or to the Japanese. Yet your government tells you that the new enemy is the Soviets. But how can you hold any amount of hatred for the Soviets when you probably lost someone to the Germans? At the same time, West Germany, plans to incorporate West Germany into NATO have begun. So in this time, the Americans come up with this plan. The idea of the honorable German soldier. That he was not fighting in favor of the Holocaust. He was not fighting to kill Jews, which they were. He was simply fighting for his land because he felt wronged by the Treaty of Versailles. And thus you had generals like Guderian, von Manstein, Balk, who all suddenly had the opportunity to write their autobiographies and present it to Allied commanders hoping to get positions of power within NATO. That look at us, we beat the Russians. Guderian tried to present himself as the inventor of armored warfare. But the one person who took precedence in this field was Field Marshal Rommel. Why? Well, for starters, he was no longer around to tell his own story. He was assassinated by Hitler, which is quite interesting. See, many people planned assassination attempts against Hitler, but not because they were against Nazism. That is what they tell us today. They were against Hitler because they felt Hitler was taking Germany in an incorrect direction in the war, that they could command the forces of the Third Reich, the Wehrmacht, the Luftwaffe, in a better manner. Of course, they couldn't because their logistics were all over the place. And thus the legend of Rommel was born. Yes, he was a good general. But he was not the legendary desert fox people like to present him as. Yes, he was far more proficient than Field Marshal Auchinleck, but he could not stand up to Monty. Field Marshal Montgomery played a very quick trick. He quickly realized that his own generals were not tactically superior to Rommel's, but they were strategically superior. So thus he drew the Germans into pitched battles, where numbers mattered, where logistics mattered, and being North Africa, tanks were breaking down here and there. So often it was not the better tank commander that would win, but one who had a functioning tank, whether it was a Matilda or a Tiger. As so said, it's a question of image. Even today, we have books on these Nazi aces and these Nazi fighters as if they were the best in the world. They were not. Simply because they never had the logistics to fight the war they did. Remember, when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, there were 600,000 horses supporting the most advanced army on the planet. And I'd like to end this question by giving a reference from the last episode of Band of Brothers, one of my favorite television series. Once the Third Reich surrendered, the American soldiers were walking through, and one of them looks at the Germans from a truck and says, "Look at this, Ford and General Motors. This is why we won. You had horses, what were you thinking?" So while I wouldn't compare Rommel to General Sagat Singh because they're products of two different generations, I will say we have enough information now to say it is pointless idealizing these Nazi generals as if they were the masters of combat, as if they invented blitzkrieg and a style of modern warfare. Thank you.
Now, Rommel was a very good general in the desert. If you study his history, his maximum success was in the North African campaign, because at that time we had General Wavell and his 30,000, 1940-41. Montgomery hadn't come on the scene. That was the time in the desert there is only one road which goes along the sea coast from El Alamein, which is north part of Egypt, along the road goes along the sea to Tobruk and across Libya and all that area. Now the thing there, the armies have to function on a road because that's where the supplies come from. What happens is that as you keep advancing on this road, Rommel could go into the desert with his tanks and appear behind the own forces at any time at his pleasure. So he was a very honorable man. My father, he retired as a Major General Amarnath Sharma, but at that time he was a Lieutenant Colonel commanding a field ambulance. Now that field ambulance is a medical setup in the desert. He tells me the story that while he was following the divisions advancing on this road, the field ambulance is slightly behind the front troops. They pick up casualties and look after them. There's a surgical area, there's a medical area and all. They're all on tentage. And they treat prisoners of war, whether they are German or anybody, or casualties, equally. German soldiers who were injured, etc., were also being treated as well as British or Indian soldiers, because the medical man saves lives. He doesn't bother who's the enemy, who's own troops. So he says he was in this hospital, and suddenly out of the desert appeared a number of tanks and armored personal carriers and things, and this very handsome and tall and strapping general got off, who couldn't speak English, but he had an interpreter with him. And the interpreter said, the general wants to examine your field hospital. So my father took him around the field hospital, and there were German prisoners who were lying in bed. All my father noticed was that the German soldiers would sort of lie to attention when this general came there. And as he went on, he saw British soldiers injured, he saw Indian soldiers, he looked after them all with good respect. As he went out after the field ambulance, he examined. He told my father, he said, well done, you're doing a damn good job, through his interpreter. And he pushed off. So my father rang up the brigade, the division commander at that time, the British officer, to say, who's the general who came and visited my hospital? They said, no general came forward from our side. Then they worked it out that it was Field Marshal Rommel. He was then a General Rommel, the Desert Fox. The idea here was that he could go into the desert and outflank easily from the southern side. There was only one road in the north where the armies used to function. Now, when you compare with Sagat, the terrain is different. Sagat had a great concept that Bangladesh is an area full of rivers. And you heard about the Meghna crossing. And also, there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of vegetation. The Meghna is a massive river. It is a tributary of the Ganga and all. And it's actually part of the Brahmaputra. It crosses the Kasi Jantia Hill, then comes due south. It's a massive river. And to cross that alone, according to military parlance as taught then, you require 2-3 days of reconnaissance, and then you close up to the banks of the river, and then you send patrols across to see where the enemy is, etc. And then you decide on crossing. It takes 7-8 days. Sagat crossed it in a matter of 1 or 2 days. Of course, the main story is about using the Air Force to cross it in great force. But I had a helicopter pilot. I was posted to Mizoram, as Anil told you, in 1973. That is after the war, 2 years after the war. I was a brigadier. And I was using an Air Force helicopter, Mi-4 in those days. And he had been flying a large number of generals. So while he was flying me around, we should keep chatting. He said, I used to fly General Sagat around. So I said, what about him? What do you know about him? He said, well, I'll tell you one story. There was a division commanded by, I think, a General Misra, which was concentrated between Tripura and the Kasi Jantia Hills in that area, the Kachar district of Assam, western border of Assam is contiguous to the Bangladesh border, the East Pakistan. The division was ready there, they were ready to come across. So Sagat visited them and heard their plans in the same helicopter pilot told me. He said, then Sagat told the pilot, let's take off, and he had to go back to Shillong where he was posted. He told the pilot, "Zara aage chalna thoda. Let me see the ground ahead." So the pilot flew forward. Then there was the international border, which the Air Force knows exactly marked on the map. So Sagat said, "Zara aage chalo, border dekhenge." He said, "Sir, I'm not permitted. My flying program does not include coming to the border." So Sagat told him that, well, your Air Force commanders in Shillong and others don't even know where you are until you tell them. You keep your mouth shut and don't tell them where you are. Zara aage chalna, zara dekhna chahte zameen kaisi hai. He went forward. They saw the river in front of them. Now the river was in Pakistan territory. You have crossed the border. So Sagat said, zara banks mein dekhte hain kya ho raha hai wahan. So like that, he encouraged the pilot to go more and more forward, and they went up and down the river, found no enemy troops on our side, on the eastern side of the bank. The river is north to south. He said, "Zara niklo, aage niklo, iske upar se chalo." So much against his will, the pilot went forward, and there was a village. And he flew around and he saw there were no military there. So he told the pilot, land in this village. So he landed on the village. And all the people came rushing. There was an open sports field or something in the village. When the helicopter landed, they all came running. They were all Pakistani. They said, "General साहब आप आ गए बड़ी मुश्किल से, हमारे कोई यहाँ ट्रूप्स नहीं हैं, वो तो दुश्मन तो आगे आ गया, दरिया के साइड में पूरी डिवीजन खड़ी है उनकी, और यहाँ कोई है नहीं हमारे ट्रूप्स." So Sagat told the villagers, "ठीक है, मैं भी लाता हूँ उनको. मैं अपना IDC जाऊँ." He told his ADC to get down on the river with the PRC-25 set and said, "You sit here, Captain साहब को चाय वगैरह पिलाओ, मैं अभी लाता हूँ troops." Flew back across the Meghna, went to Misra's headquarters and said, "Look, we've heard your plans. Now would you and your O group is the main advisors of the div commander, the head of the artillery and the head of the infantry and so on. So 3-4 लोगों को लेके, we have PRC sets, he said, "Get into my helicopter, I want to show you something." Took them across the border, landed them in that village, and told the Pakistani, "देखो तुम्हारी फौज आ गई है, इनको चाय वगैरह पिलाना." Then he told the general, "Now you're here, get your division across." So this is the method. I mean, it was impossible for an army to cross a huge river if it had been held by the Pakistan. But there's one spot where it was not being held. And from there, if you look at the map, it's a direct southward trend to Dhaka. You cross no more obstacles.
General Hasni, you want to say something?
I just have a brief intervention to say, you have to be self-critical also in the context of your question. The aspect of popularity, internationally, nationally, anything, image projection, is something that we have never learnt in our country, easily, militarily. Is there any reason why General Sagat never became an army commander? I mean, have you ever contemplated the most successful field commander of the Indian Army retired as a corps commander? Why didn't he become an army commander? There were so many issues involved in it that time. That's why. I mean, one has to be critical about it. Let me tell you, a very popular military commander is an African called Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda. Fought a fantastic campaign from the Tutsi army defeating the Hutus. Who talks about him? Because this is all Time magazine, Newsweek, international media. They are the ones who are. Ultimately, it is books like this which will have to project our own capabilities and our own achievements.
As a Navy man, I can only tell you, having followed his history, after Nathula, he disobeyed and brought in the artillery. When he did that, naturally, General Sharma sitting here, any other general would have said, "How did you disobey?" But I'd end the story by just telling you that Nelson also did the same thing. If you come to my museum in Defense Colony, I've written there, the history of England changed with the Battle of Trafalgar. So the Battle of Trafalgar, I'll just take 1 second, Ajay Singh, he was given an order by the commander that you turn into the wind. And he had to obey the order because that is what the Indian Army does. But Nelson had one eye less. So he put the telescope on that eye and said, I don't see the signal. And he turned away from the wind and he won the Battle of Trafalgar. So I have a feeling after hearing, I must admire your knowledge. Rommel and all, come down to my museum, we'll see how much you know about Navy. Ultimately, as General Atas Danan said, it's strategy that wins wars. The submarines and the aircraft carriers won the war. It was them they were fighting over land. So I think I must congratulate you as one historian to the other. You at your age of 22. It's amazing. Congratulations. A Navy has been put forward.
Only
Sir, I look forward to discussing the Battle of Midway and Leyte Gulf and the Philippine Sea with a naval historian like yourself.
one, of course, that's called turning a blind eye.
Yes.
You know, what Nelson did. You know, but I think General Hasnain raised a very, very important point. Issues of the narrative. I'm not an expert on generals, but in India, we got to create. I'm a student of popular culture. We have a strange relationship between popular culture and armed forces. On the one hand, the armed forces are venerated. On the other hand, they're completely neglected in popular narrative, where cricketers, film stars, and other assorted celebrities take center stage. So I think it's important to set right that narrative. Of course, through contributions like this, but I would like to turn the question around to you and to the rest of the audience. If anyone is here from mass media, television, cinema, please concentrate on this. Let's have more stuff in popular culture on our real heroes. That's how we'll have Sagat Singh. Sagat Singh should have had half a dozen books on him by now.
Yes, yes.
And written by best-selling authors,
Correct.
occupying bestseller spaces.
Commodore Kessler, I am from the media. So I understand and I value what you're saying. Just to add to one small incident, I've been in the movie industry for 35 years now. And my son wanted to attend a heritage festival for the military history festival. And I took him there. And there's our friend, Major General Pavan Anand there. And he asked him, sir, are any celebrities coming for the festival? So he looked at me and he said, why don't you bring some celebrities to our festival? And my son said, my father knows nobody, no celebrities. And I've been in the movie business 35 years. So I looked at him and he said, celebrities are Veer Chakra, Mahavir Chakra, and Paramveer Chakra. So that's why we encouraged him to write this book. We have to change the narrative, absolutely. We have to get it right. The page 3 concept and all the reels that go around of mega weddings, they ignore the armed forces. That is going to change in this country very soon.
Thank you, sir. My name is Yogesh. My question is focused on the title. I'm taking something from the title. In the title, you have strategy, and then you have campaign and valor. We've discussed campaign and valor to a great extent today, but I think very little discussion has happened on strategy. So my question is to the author on strategy. On the broader scale, from the war, what are your main takeaways? What do you think was the achievement of the nation in terms of civil-military coordination, civil-military cooperation on the broader strategic perspective? What was the main strategic lesson of the war?
There were many lessons from both fronts in almost every field.
Strategic, he's saying.
Yes.
Strategic.
Yeah. If you look at strategy, it starts at the level of the brigade, goes up to the level of the corps. Now, when it comes to 4 Corps, their strategy was based after the Battle of Dalhai. It was at the Battle of Dalhai where 2 Jat suffered an extremely high casualty rate. And it was at that moment, and this is also written in General Sagat Singh's biography, that 4 Corps knew that the common Pakistani soldier was no pushover. So many months of fighting a counterinsurgency battle, an uphill battle, had made him into a fierce warrior, and he would die before he gave an inch of land to any of our forces. After understanding this, General Sagat Singh's strategy focused on only fighting one stronghold, and that stronghold was Akhora. So he started the war on the into of 1st December when he sent a division-sized force into Akhara. The rest of his units simply outwitted, outgunned, and outmaneuvered all of Niazi's forces within that region, most notably at Laksham, where the Pakistanis abandoned the fortress, assuming it would be attacked, they changed their position, and suddenly had to run back, only to find out that the Indians had taken both places. On the Western Front, sadly, we suffered a few notable failures. The most prominent of these was the Battle of the Chamb, where Pakistan, for the second time, had what I think can be described as a tactical victory to some extent.
But a tactical victory for Pakistan?
Yes, sir.
No, I don't think so. It may have been a very sub-tactical victory, perhaps, but its overall impact did not make a major difference. The impact would have happened if the Iron Bridge had fallen.
Yes. I'll agree.
If the bridge had fallen, it would have meant that the road from Jammu, Rajouri, Poonch would have been cut off. That would have been the difference.
I agree with sir on that. But the question remains, how did Pakistan succeed in surprising us in the same region twice? Well, in this case, 10 Division's original plan was to launch an offensive into this region. By 1st November, and this comes from, by the way, one of the greatest military historians we have in India today, Major General Sandhu, who has written one of the best accounts of the Battle of the Chamb, being as unbiased as he could, even though his father was the divisional commander. So he has written that on 1st of November, or around that time, the plans were changed. 10 Division was forced into a defensive setup from an offensive. After that, they also had to pull back many other troops from, I think, the western bank of the Munawar Tawi. And thus, when you put infantry without artillery support, without armor, against armor that is, even if it's a Sherman tank, an infantryman cannot fight that, no matter how many RCL guns you put up. And thus it was the failure of the 15 Corps as a whole that area was allowed to be taken, because 10 Division fought with absolute valor to defend as much territory as they could, and they did not let the Pakistanis cross the river. Coming down south, and I know this is going a bit long, but in the Shakargarh Bulge, 3 divisions, the 1 corps of the Indian Army battled the 1 corps of the Pakistan Army. It was 3 divisions against a small unit called the Changiz Force, which simply stood there for delaying purposes. Now, in their own history, they've written, our job was to keep the Indian Army away from Zafarwal for 24 hours, perhaps 48 hours. We succeeded in doing that for a full week. Now, I do not put any negative comments against generals within the Indian Army. I simply write history as it was day by day, leaving it for the audience to judge. In this case, one of our failures was that 39 Division failed to link up with 54 Division, which was arguably the vanguard of this force. Because of that, we suffered at the Battle of Chakra, where 54 Division had to divert another armored regiment, one of 2 they had. And hiding somewhere outside Zafarwal was a full armored brigade, which means by the time 54 Div got to Basantar, they only had 1 armored regiment, which would have potentially faced an entire armored brigade. But here, it was not strategy, but tactics that won the battle. One of the greatest generals we have not spoken about till now, who comes from the Armored Corps, is Lieutenant General Hanut Singh Rathore. He was a lieutenant colonel at that time, and he was sitting behind a minefield with 3 grenadiers and 16 Madras across it. The minefield was taking long to clear. There was artillery that the Pakistan Air Force was hitting them. And it would have taken at least 24 hours or 48 hours for tanks to get across. Yet he sat in his tent meditating. Now the symbol of the 17 Puna horse dates back to British colonial era, when they were actually a horse riding into battle. Something they captured from Persia is the hand of Allah, as they describe it. That night, the hand of Allah was above 17 Puna horse, because Lieutenant Colonel Hanut Singh gave an order, go ahead. Not a single tank will pull back an inch. And our tanks ventured into the minefield, not one of them was destroyed. The very next morning, one jeep and another truck blew up on the mines. Had 17 Pune horse not crossed the minefield and arrived to defend Jarpal and Ghazipur, 3 grenadiers and 16 Madras would have faced the onslaught of 13 Lancers, the Pakistani Army regiment, by themselves. They would have either been destroyed or taken heavy casualties.
This was Khetarpal's battle.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Satyajit. Thank you.
It is an encyclopedia, sir.
I just want to say one thing here. When the Pakistanis were trying to defend Shakargarh salient from the north, they knew full well that our armored division and one corps had concentrated in the Samba area and were going to push southward. The first town that they captured was a place called Maharajke. Now, the Pakistani minefield was not a normal minefield. They extended a long distance with very few mines, but they marked it. So when you are trying to enter this mine, you see the markings of a minefield. What you don't realize that the distance between mines is far more than what is authorized under the, I don't know, some military engineers are here. There's a technique of laying a minefield. Every yard of front must have one anti-tank mine in layers of 3. Instead of this, every 10, 15 yards had only one anti-tank mine. Now when Hanut decided to cross this, he put the whole regiment in one line and they just followed the leading tank. And he said if anybody gets knocked off, I mean the tracks get knocked off in a tank, you would bypass him and carry on. You see? So the leading tank had what are known as mine plows. If you're plowing the ground as you go, so they went across and the concentration of the minefield, instead of being one anti-tank mine per yard of front, it was hardly one minefield per 10 or 15 yards of front. So with the result, it was a very loose minefield, and hence he was very lucky that he crossed across. But the real battle took place when he was on the other side. Pune Horse won a Paramveer Chakra because one troop of Pune Horse with the Grenadiers, one company, held off 3-4 attacks by a Pakistani armored brigade, firing to the last man and last round sort of thing. And Khetarpal, his elder brother is in my regiment, retired as a brigadier. Khetarpal refused to leave his tank even when it was shot and caught fire. He was ordered by his commander to leave the tank. He says, no, my gun is firing, I'll keep firing. Because the Pakistanis were attacking with waves of tanks at that area. Now the Pakistanis were very brave also. There was the Pakistani brigade commander who got defeated by tank and machine gun fire again and again and again. Yet he mustered his troops and attacked again and again and again. When the battle was over and our commanders went forward to see the field to pick up injured and dead and all that, they found this dead body of the brigade commander of the Pakistan Army, his body riddled with bullets. So one of our commanders wrote the citation of that man. And this brigadier has fought extremely well. Despite so many casualties in his brigade, he mustered the courage to fight, to attack 4 or 5 times. And he died leading his men. He wrote this on a piece of paper and put it in his pocket. And then naturally when the war finished, the Pakistanis came and picked up the dead bodies. He was given the Hilal-e-Jurrat by Pakistan on the citation of an Indian military commander.
That's very nice to hear. Air Vice Marshal Anil Golani has been one of the inspirations behind this book. He has been very helpful, and I'll request him to say a few words.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed honored and humbled in the presence of so many war heroes and veterans over here this evening. And a lot has been spoken about the war, so I will not delve upon the 71 war and the book that Satyajit has written. I just want to make a mention of, how I came across Satyajit on, I think about 2.5 or close to 3 years ago. One morning I get a call from some young lad telling me that I'm so-and-so. So I said, yes, what can I do for you? He said, I want to interview, X, Y, Z, Air Chief Marshal so-and-so, Air Marshal so-and-so. So can I have their contact details? So I said, for what? So he says, I'm doing some history and I want to write a book or something. So I said, please come and meet me. I want to see who you are, before I divulge, the contact details of the people that I knew. And he came and met me. And I must say, I admire his spirit, his zest for life, and his enthusiasm for putting this book together at such a young age. While doing his graduation, the amount of effort that he's put in is tremendous, and I'd request you all for a big round of applause for Satyajit. My hero today is Satyajit Lal, and I'm sure that he has a lot of juice left in him. And as he says that he's got 2 more volumes of the book coming up, and I hope to see them also sooner rather than later. And all that I can say is I wish him all the best as he proceeds for his post-graduation to the US. And I think I need Dr. Bhuvan and Mrs. Lal here on the stage, because it's you all who facilitated this and made this happen. So a big round of applause for them. Please. Thank you.
Since you heard Satyajit speak these, long lines about whatever this book is about, we have been subjected to this torture for 2.5 years, 3 years. And both me and my wife, for the love of literature, we don't figure out, what this is about. But I'm so happy we have such a patient audience so intently listening to this. And with this, we come to the vote of thanks, and I request Major General Pavan Anand to kindly come here on stage. Round of applause for Major General Pavan Anand, who has been a great friend of ours.
So let me first start by thanking Satyajit for coming up with a book which this generation I thought was not thinking about. And it's actually tremendous that it would hopefully start some sort of a wave of reminiscence about what the Indian military is all about. And thanks, of course, to Bhuvanji for getting us all together here with all the stars and the men who were actually there when those battles were fought. What's my connect with this? Satyajit, of course. We spoke a large number of times about various things, how to bring this together. But also through my regiment. I come from 1 Armored Engineer Regiment, which was part of 1 Armored Division with you, sir, during the war, commanded by General Sani. That's my regiment. My father, Brigadier Manmohan Kumar, that time Lieutenant Colonel Manmohan Kumar, commanding his regiment in Ladakh. His regiment took part in certain battles on the west, almost captured Pune, and then came back, just leaving it to the Pakis. He also handled on the Chinese side. So he was officiating commander of a brigade on the Chinese side also during this. As a brigade major of 80 Brigade during the Kargil War, I was looking across from the vantage points through binoculars, and I would see the waters of Mangala Dam and go through my mind as to where my grandfather comes from, just across those waters. And then you begin to wonder, what is this all about? We are fighting wars for a piece of land, but we are actually fighting wars for our honor. And let me also recollect that D.R. Mankekar, when he wrote the 1971 war, it is the first and perhaps one of the best books I've read on the 71 war. One chapter is dedicated to calling it the Engineers' War, because it was riverine terrain and it was all about the engineers getting everyone across. I think this couldn't have come at a better time, as General Hasnain said. Today, what's happening in Bangladesh kind of brings attention to what we've gone through with them. But it also brings, very nicely brought out by him, how we need to just carry it forward in the future. I think time flows like a river in one direction, but events flow like the tide and the ebb. They go back and forth. One day it was East Pakistan, then we liberated Bangladesh. Today there's a wave which appears to be in a different direction. The ebbs and the tides will happen as long as we keep, what somebody said, the broad strategy together. And I have no doubt that as we keep our strategies together, it's this Gen Z which reminds themselves of history and learns from history, continues to encourage looking back in time so that we can do well ahead in time, is what this book is all about. And therefore, on behalf of all of us here, and on behalf, definitely on behalf of Satyajit and Bhuvanji, I thank all of you for being here. I thank the panelists.
I have to go home.
Yeah. I'm going to save her for the last. So I thank all of you for being here and being a part of this. All of us remembering what this was all about, all of us thinking how it is going to be in the future. And that's where I leave it with you. I think, Satyajit, this is the beginning of a journey. Yeah. And I have no doubt, as you said, mothers are who build the thoughts into the young. I think you've already done that, Aarti. And I have no doubt that Satyajit will continue on this journey, encouraging the next generation to remember what this was all about and what we need to make of it in the future. So thank you everyone for being here.